Hey, you guys want to know what's super great? Is when your best friend of 15 plus years decides that she doesn't want to hang out with you anymore because you're a black hole of sadness and depression. That's great. It's really awesome. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm starting this channel because books are cheaper than therapy and discussing them helps me cope with existential dread. So what I'm going to be doing with the channel is I figure I'm going to start alternating a list of books that I've read throughout the month with a breakdown of one specific book, whether it be a really great book that I love or one that is completely insane, like tonight's book. The first book that I will be doing a breakdown of is called Survive the Night by Riley Sager. It's set in 1991. It's about a girl named Charlie who decides that it's a great idea to go on a road trip in the middle of the night with a complete stranger after her best friend was murdered by a serial killer. Throughout the night, Charlie becomes more and more convinced that the man behind the wheel, Josh Baxter, is in fact the same person who murdered her best friend. And so now she must survive the night. So how I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to... Oh, did you guys hear my jaw pop? What the hell? So how I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to begin by introducing the main characters. I'll walk us through the plot. Then I will discuss some of my favorite parts, any criticisms that I might have, and then give my overall recommendation at the end of the video. So let's just jump right into it by introducing our main character, Charlie Jordan. She is a film student at Oliphant University in New Jersey. Charlie is a quiet person who keeps to herself, doesn't like to go out. I can totally relate to all of that. Instead, she prefers to spend all of her time and energy thinking about, discussing, watching films. The obsession with film seemed to be something that runs in her family a little bit. She was named after a Hitchcock character. Her aunt at one point had tried to go out to Hollywood and become an actress. The entire family seems to use watching movies as a way to cope with things. This is especially true for Charlie, who tends to hallucinate a movie-like version of events that are happening when she becomes super overwhelmed. And this is to such extremes that she is actually on medication to stop the hallucinations from happening. Now, obviously, I'm nowhere to the extremes that Charlie is as far as her use of escapism to cope, but I am somebody who also tends to use escapism as a coping technique. It's mostly why I like to read and write so much. So I found it easy to relate to Charlie in that aspect. Another thing that I found very relatable is the fact that she is terrified of driving. She does not drive whatsoever. I can definitely relate. I didn't get my license until I was 20 years old because I was just terrified of operating a vehicle. I still won't drive on the highway, and I'm 32. I just don't trust myself to be in control of a machine that large going those speeds. And the reason Charlie does not drive, why she's terrified of driving, is because she actually became orphaned when she was a teenager because her parents had both died in a car accident. Now that I'm thinking about it too, I don't know if it's just me, but a lot of the times when I'm driving, I just have these intrusive thoughts of like I could just veer into oncoming traffic and just fuck my shit up. I don't, obviously, but it's always there in the back of my mind that like I could. do that if I really wanted to. Anyway, Charlie is having a really tough time coping with the murder of her best friend slash dorm roommate. And we begin the story with Charlie's decision to drop out of college and move back in with her aunt in Ohio. Another way I can relate to Charlie is she makes some of the dumbest decisions throughout this book. And I'm a complete dumbass myself, so I get it. It's like looking in a mirror. The next character we have is Madeline Forrester, sort of. She's already dead at the beginning of the book. However, she is sort of the catalyst for the entire story, and she sort of pops up once or twice in Charlie's hallucinations. So I'm going to count her as a character. So Maddie was assigned to be Charlie's dorm mate, and when they met, it was like love at first sight for Charlie. She just instantly adored her. She loves movies almost as much as Charlie does. They instantly became best friends, and Maddie dragged Charlie everywhere. I hate to speak ill of the dead, but I kind of found Maddie to be an insufferable ghost of Greta Garbo kind of wannabe. Like, I'm picturing her as this 40-something chain-smoking failed actress, and she's not supposed to be. She's supposed to be in her early 20s. She speaks and dresses like she's some glamorous old Hollywood movie star. She uses one of those like long filters to smoke cigarettes. I don't know what they're called, but it's the thing that Cruella de Vil uses. I don't know. I just found her completely obnoxious and pretentious. But she likes The Cure, and I also like The Cure, so I can't hate her that much. But she is pretty much like #1 example of an insufferable Cure fan. I say that as example #2. She's pretty much the exact opposite of Charlie, you know, super outgoing. She loves to go out, loves to party. She makes friends everywhere she goes. She drags Charlie along to all of these different places and events in an attempt to sort of break her out of her shell. She also loves her Mema more than life itself. That was a whole big thing as well. Her parents weren't ever really in the picture, so she was raised by her Mema, and they called each other every single day and talked on the phone for hours. I just want to say I hate Mema, by the way. Not the character, but the word Mema. Memas are for Walmart, and Peepaws too. I don't know. I apologize if that's what you call your grandparents, but the word makes me cringe. I hate it. The next character we have is Robbie, Charlie's boyfriend. Robbie is super good looking. He's a nice guy. He's super popular. He's studying to be a mathematics professor, and he's just this all-around perfect dude, meaning he's boring as hell. Charlie sort of kind of breaks things off with him at the beginning of the book because she's dropping out of school, so she figures they're not ever going to see each other again, so there's not really any point in pursuing the relationship any further. She doesn't explicitly say like I'm breaking up with you or it's over or anything like that. It just seems to be something that the two of them both mutually understand is happening. And it was kind of sad because, you know, he seems really sweet and he genuinely really cared about Charlie a whole lot. You know, he didn't like the way that Madeline would just sort of treat Charlie like her little lapdog and just drag her everywhere, and he was constantly, you know, encouraging Charlie to stick up for herself. He didn't think that Madeline really treated her very fairly. The last character we have is Josh Baxter. Josh met Charlie at this student ride share board on campus. I like to call it Murder Uber. It's where students can like post if they're going a long distance, where they're going, in case any other students are traveling that way for the holidays. So that way they can, you know, like ride together and share like gas costs and things like that. At least I think. I never really lived the whole dorm room party uh, college life experience, so I would not know. I don't even know if that's like a real thing that they do. Maybe? I don't know. So Josh is a little bit older than Charlie. He's charming and handsome. He loves Nirvana. He hates Paula Abdul. Not like a super fan of movies or anything, but he seems to really enjoy listening to Charlie talk about them. When we first meet Josh, he is explaining to Charlie that he is also headed to Ohio to take care of his sick father. What a lucky coincidence, right? Our story begins with Charlie trying to find a ride back to Ohio because she doesn't drive by posting a request to the student rideshare board on campus. Her best friend Maddie was recently murdered by a serial killer that the media has dubbed the campus killer. Maddie was the third victim of this killer. It had been 2 years since the last killing. However, the police are doubtful that this is some sort of copycat killer because there is a very important detail that the police have been hiding from the public, and that is with each victim, the killer has taken a tooth from them as sort of like a souvenir, I guess. So the media doesn't know it. The public in general doesn't know it. The only people who know this detail are the police and the people directly involved with the case and direct family members of the victims. I just want to pause here also and add that Charlie is not using her best friend's death to its full potential here. Everybody knew that Maddie and Charlie were best friends. Everyone's trying to be super nice to her. They're like, if we can get you anything, just let me know. If you want to switch dorm rooms because it's too painful to be in there by yourself, we'll switch dorm rooms with you. You know, if you need to take some time off of school, let us know. Everyone is just trying to bend over backwards to be super sweet to her. Like, girl, you could have at least gotten a free latte out of the situation, is all I'm saying. Josh Baxter, who shows up right behind Charlie, takes one look at her note and is like, oh, you're going to Ohio? I'm going to Ohio. What a lucky coincidence. When would you like to leave? To which Charlie replies, as soon as possible. To which Josh replies, excellent. Let's leave tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. So let's recap here. Charlie is going to be getting into a car with a complete stranger that she knows nothing about in the dead of night after her best friend was just murdered on campus by a serial killer. Like, does none of this set off immediate alarm bells to you? I guess not Charlie. She is so desperate to leave that she just accepts. She's like, yep, whatever, let's go. So her boyfriend Robbie is instantly weirded out by this because, you know, he has some goddamn sense, and he begs Charlie to just wait a couple more weeks until the end of the semester, and then he will drive her down there personally. Charlie is so desperate to get away as soon as possible that she's like, nope, I gotta leave right now. So that's where we begin the story. So Robbie makes her promise that if anything seems off about the guy, that she will not get in the car with him, and she will just wait for Robbie to take her in a couple of weeks. She agrees. Robbie then asks if she has been taking her medication. She lies and says, yes, that is right. She is lying. She is not taking her medication that stops her from hallucinating. Right before she is getting in a car in the dead of night with a stranger while a serial killer is on the loose. This particularly pisses me off about Charlie because the night that Maddie was killed, they had actually gotten into like a huge argument. Basically what had happened was Maddie really wanted to go see this Cure cover band because she thought the lead singer was cute because he looked like Robert Smith, which I can relate to. That's probably like the only event that I would go to if I were in Charlie's shoes. But so she drags Charlie out to this concert and then immediately ditches her. Goes off to start making out with some dude in the corner. Charlie's pissed, so she tells Maddie that she's leaving. Maddie's like, wait, what? You can't leave. Don't leave. I promise, I'll hang out with you now. Charlie's about to just say, okay, whatever. But then Maddie goes, plus I hate to walk home alone. And that just makes Charlie lose it. She's like, you always make this about you. You are completely selfish. You don't care how I feel at all. Fuck off. And that is the last thing that Charlie ever says to Maddie is fuck off. So as she's walking away, she's thinking that Maddie maybe might be following her. Maybe she changed her mind and decided to walk home with Charlie then. So she turns around and she sees Maddie with this dude who is wearing a fedora. He's lighting her cigarette and she doesn't quite get a good look at his face, and she's pretty sure she hallucinated that whole entire thing. However, she still, when questioned by police, says, oh yeah, I saw the guy that killed Maddie. I saw the guy that she was with. Police are like, great, what did he look like? To which Charlie replies, I don't know. I hallucinate sometimes. I'm not even sure if that was a person that I saw. And like, could you imagine just how frustrating that would be for the police, let alone Maddie's family? Like Maddie's mom actually calls to like cuss out Charlie for not remembering and for not even trying to stick around and make sure that Maddie was safe. And she's like, you're a terrible friend. That like gets to her a lot and makes her feel really upset, which, yeah, I would too. But my point is why this really pisses me off that she's not taking her medication is, that's a whole, like, the reason why there's this whole big hiccup in the investigation is because of your hallucinations. So if you knew that this was such a problem and you knew that this might be the reason why they're unable to catch Maddie's killer, why would you stop taking your medication that stops you from hallucinating? At the very least, you would think that she would like keep taking it like in memory of Maddie, like she doesn't want that to happen again or whatever. Anyway, that part just really irritated me. So Robbie says goodbye to her, and as they're saying goodbye, he kind of like jokingly says, if things get weird, make sure you give me a call, and you can use a code word or a code phrase. You can tell me things took a detour, and I'll know that something is horribly wrong, and I'll come rescue you. So Robbie leaves, and Josh comes to pick her up and is immediately acting weird and suspicious. He's like, oh, I'll take your bags. I'll put them in the car. And he's like angling himself at the trunk to make sure that like Charlie's not seeing whatever is in his trunk as he's putting her bags in there. So again, alarm bells? Anybody? Red flags? So Charlie begins to think, yeah, that's kind of weird. But my bags are already in his car, so I guess I gotta go. So they're driving and they get to chatting, and Josh tells her that he actually is not a student there. He's actually a janitor at the university. Now, immediately I call bullshit because he's described as being super hot. And have you ever seen a hot janitor? Or do you think that you're a hot janitor? Send in your photos, let me know, and I will rate those photos and tell you whether or not you are a hot janitor. So Charlie opens up about the movie hallucinations in her mind, and Josh is super chill about it. He's super sweet about the whole thing. Eventually, they stop for coffee at a gas station, and one thing sort of leads to another, and Josh's wallet ends up open on Charlie's lap. Charlie takes a look at it and notices that his ID is from a completely different state. It's not from Ohio or New Jersey. I think it's from New York or something. And it says that his name is Jake. She begins to have some doubts. Finally, some red flags are popping up for Charlie. Her suspicions are taken even further when Josh mistakenly says he's going to one city in Ohio, but earlier he told her that he was going to like a completely different city. And so she calls him on it, and he's like, oh, well, I grew up in this city, but I'm actually going to this city, so I probably like mixed them up at some point. So Charlie begins to become super suspicious finally, and she decides that she wants to prove that he is up to no good, that he is lying about who he is. So she begins to like ask him all these questions to kind of like trip him up. Finally, he gets so annoyed and he's like, all right, fine, you got me. I'm not a janitor at the university. I'm actually an employee of the Radio Shack down the street. But you wouldn't have gotten in my car if you knew that I wasn't somehow affiliated with the university. And so Charlie accepts this, but then in the back of her mind she's like, well, why did he need for me specifically to get into his car? And yeah, so finally Charlie is beginning to think with some goddamn sense. By the way, sorry if it sounds like I'm sick. I am. Anyway, so finally Josh gets super fed up with all of these questions that Charlie is asking, and so he's like, all right, fine, you wanna play 20 questions? Let's play 20 questions. And so he turns it into a game. I'm thinking of an item and you have to choose what it is. You have to guess what it is in 20 questions or less. Charlie sometimes can be super smart, and so she does guess what the item is in less than 20 questions. And what is the item? It's a tooth. I really liked this part. I thought there was some great tension building. I thought it was spooky and creepy, so I really liked this part. Anyway, immediately Josh is like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. That was really insensitive of me. I'm sorry. I forgot that your friend, her tooth was ripped out of her head. To which Charlie gets even more freaked out because, again, the police did not disclose this to the media. So the only people who would have known about it were the police, the direct family members, and the killer. So now Charlie is 100% convinced that Josh is up to no good, some sort of nefarious deed, and so she has at this point decided that she needs to escape the vehicle. They are about to pull up to a toll booth, so Charlie plans to jump out of the car and just run into the night as soon as they stop to pay the toll. So she's focused, she's got her hand on that door handle, she's ready to just jump out as soon as they stop, when all of a sudden the Nirvana song that they had been listening to a long time ago before starts playing again. It's Come As You Are, by the way. That song plays consistently throughout this book. And Charlie's kind of thrown off, and Josh is immediately like, whoa, that must have been some movie in your head. You were like unresponsive for like 5 to 10 minutes. And so she's immediately thrown off. She's thinking, usually she can sort of discern whether or not she's hallucinating and what parts she's hallucinating about. And she's so thrown off and she's so confused that she misses her chance to jump out at the toll booth.
You locked the door again. Did you?
My son is trying to break in. So Charlie is like, weren't we just playing 20 questions? And Josh was like, no. And she's like, I swear we were just playing 20 questions. And he's like, no. And she's like, but you're lying to me. Your wallet says, your ID says that your name is Jake. And so Josh is like, bitch, look at my ID. And he like tosses his wallet to her. She opens it up. Sure enough, it is Josh Baxter from New Jersey. So she's like, well, shit, I guess I really was hallucinating very hard or something.